Hi, I'm Jane Edge, the Chief Executive of CBM Australia. In this COVID crisis, CBM is on the ground in some of the poorest places on earth. We urgently need your help to provide our partner hospitals with protective masks and gloves, and to deliver emergency food and hygiene kits, including soap, to those who are most vulnerable, people living in poverty with disabilities. Please take a few moments now and donate at cbm.org.au. Thank you so much for your support.
Hi, my name's Mel Wade and I'm here in Sydney, Australia.
And I'm Luke Weston and I'm here on the other side of the ditch in Auckland, New Zealand, and welcome to a very special live streamed event that we're bringing you today as part of the Connect 20 Online Media and Arts Summit.
Now, many of you will be familiar with our next guest, but for those of you who aren't, Dr. Caroline Leaf is a communication pathologist and cognitive neuroscientist specialising in cognitive and metacognitive neuropsychology. So basically that means...
Yeah, there's a lot of big words in there for sure. Basically, she's a specialist in how the mind and the brain connect and then how that impacts on mental health.
Okay, great. See? You just explained it so easily, which is very great. And Dr. Leaf is a best-selling author and renowned international speaker who lives over in America.
That's right. Today, Dr. Leaf is going to be sharing on a very practical topic. I'm sure you're going to find this one interesting as well, Mel. It's how to detox your brain in 5 steps.
Wow, 5 steps. I feel like I need about 10 at the moment. Anyway, we hope that you enjoy this presentation from Dr. Caroline Leaf.
Hi, I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf, and I am so thrilled and excited to talk to you about detoxing your mind and detoxing your brain. So, if you think of it, so many of us spend so much time detoxing our bodies. We go on all these different diets, we eat all these different ways, we do all these different exercise plans, and those are so vitally important, absolutely, for making sure that our mental and physical health is functioning. But do we really detox our minds? Do we really detox our brains? Do you even know how to do that, or even what it means? Well, this is my field and my area of speciality. For 30 years, I've been researching the mind-brain connection. I ran a clinical practice for 25 years. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist and communication pathologist. I'm a mind specialist. I basically deal in mind and all things pertaining to mental health. So I'm going to share in this seminar, I'm going to share with you the principles of how you can detox your brain and detox your mind. Notice I keep saying brain and mind. This is the first thing that you need to learn. The first thing that you need to learn is that your mind and your brain are not the same thing. You are not your brain. You control your brain. So essentially, there's a non-physical part of you and there is a physical part of you. The non-physical part of you incorporates your mind, your non-conscious mind, which is active 24/7, and your conscious mind, which is only active when you're awake. So your non-conscious and your conscious mind work together. Obviously, your conscious mind only when you're awake. Your non-conscious mind and conscious mind form the biggest part of who you are as a human. And it's literally the 90 to 99% of who you are. Then your mind has to work through something, and that is your physical brain. So your mind works through your physical brain. So the brain is made of physical substance. And research is showing us daily how complex the brain is. It's incredibly complex. In the 30 years that I've been in this field, the changes in our understanding of the human brain has been absolutely phenomenal. And every day we learn something new. The key thing here is that our brain is responding to our mind. The brain is the physical substrate. As you as a human, it forms somewhere between 1 and 10% of who you are. And then the non-conscious and the conscious mind are the non-physical. Two separate things, but they work together. They need each other. The mind works through the brain feeds back into the mind. Two separate things that need each other. So therefore, you are not your brain. You are not a victim of your biology. You're a victor over and above your biology. You can change the structure of your brain. You can actually create matter out of your mind. You know, we often hear that statement, mind over matter. it really is true. Science shows us, research shows us that you are creating matter with your mind. So if you change your mind, you change your matter. So your brain is neuroplastic. I did some of the first neuroplasticity research back in the 80s. I worked with traumatic brain injury and people with severe learning disabilities, autism, dementias, various different types of disorders, emotional disorders, trauma victims, etc. And I basically worked out systems based on how our mind and brain work and the science of thought, on how when you change how you use your mind, and when you deliberately and intentionally use your mind correctly, then you're going to change your brain. And it's going to have a beneficial effect if you change it obviously in a positive direction, and it's going to have a toxic effect if you change it in a toxic direction. So essentially, our mind, this non-physical, massive part of us, is our ability to think, feel, and choose. Those three things go together. So you have this ability to think and to feel and to choose. And you're doing that 24/7. During the day, you will think, feel, and choose all this non-physical mental activity, which then moves through your brain as quantum energy, electromagnetic energy, and chemical energy. And as it's moving through your brain, this is you driving it. You drive your mind through your brain. I know it's kind of a funny concept to think, but that's what's happening. And as you're doing that, you're generating this amazing energy, which is a signal. And that signal then changes the structure of the brain. You see, as you think, as you feel, you generate this wave that builds up. Think of a wave on a beach. That's the easiest way to understand this. Think of how a wave builds. So the building is your thinking and your feeling, okay, in response to the signals, the events and circumstances of life. And then as you choose, then the wave crashes. And as the wave crashes, that's the signal that activates genetic expression. Your genes are in your DNA. In every single cell of your body is your full complement of your DNA. And as you think, feel, and as you choose, you activate, you switch on your genetic expression. What does this mean? Well, this means that as you're thinking, feeling, and choosing, and your genes are expressing, you are controlling how your cells in your brain and your body function, including you are building thoughts into your brain of the information that you are responding to. So at any one moment in time, you are controlling the functioning of all 75 to 100 trillion of the cells of your brain and your body. It's quite a thing. And you are building physical thoughts inside of your brain, which means that you are changing the structure of your brain with your thoughts, which means that you are using your mind to change your brain, and your brain is responding to your mind. And because of neuroplasticity, if you've wired something in and you don't like the thoughts that you're thinking and the actions that you are performing and the words that you are saying and the way your life's going and the direction of your life, well, then you can change that because of the concept of neuroplasticity. Back in the 80s, they didn't believe the brain could change. I was told when I was doing my research it was a ridiculous question. But I showed with my research that you can get up to 35 to 75% improvement on an intellectual, cognitive, social, and emotional level when you deliberately and intentionally use your mind correctly. So when I talk about detoxing the brain, when I talk about detoxing the mind, I am teaching you basically how to deliberately and intentionally use your mind, use your thinking, feeling, and choosing in the correct way to create the right structural changes inside of the brain, to generate the right quantum and electromagnetic and chemical signals through your brain and through your body. And in doing so, you are impacting the effectiveness of how your cells in your brain and your body are working. This is powerful because scientists show us that we are actually wired for love, which means that we do not have any circuitry in our brain for any wiring in our brain for anything toxic. By anything toxic, I'll use that as an umbrella term for anything like bitterness, unforgiveness, anger, rejection, hatred, fighting, etc. All that toxic stuff, lack of peace, lack of love. What scientists have shown is that we are wired for love, that every structure in our brain and our body, down to every cell, down to the subatomic level, that is wired for love. We have an optimism bias. We are naturally leaning towards the positive versus the negative. That is our natural default mode of functioning and our default mode in our brain and body design and in every cell. So with our thinking, feeling, and choosing, with our free will, which is our ability to choose, we are generating these signals, and we are either making toxic or healthy decisions. We are either making love or fear decisions, however you want to look at this. We are wired for love. You're making a love decision. We're not wired for toxicity. So when you make the wrong decision, you are wiring that into your brain, or you're wiring love into your brain. Through your choices, you are wiring either of those into your brain. Now we go through life, it's busy, we're responding all the time. So at any one moment, we are responding to the signals of life and wiring stuff in. So when we respond in the wrong way, when we think, feel, and choose incorrectly, we still cause the genetic expression, the wave of energy still flows, you're still going to build the thought. Because the genetic expression makes amino acids. The amino acids group together and form proteins. The proteins group together and you have thoughts, physical structures in your brain that look like trees. Your thoughts look like trees. You build those. And if they're toxic, they are causing neurochemical chaos in your brain. They're causing brain damage. And fortunately for neuroplasticity, if you've wired them in, you can wire them out. So when I talk about the five-step learning process in my 21-day brain detox, I'm going to tell you now that you can do 5 steps in 7 to 16 minutes a day over a period of 21 days. And in that time, over doing that like deliberately and intentionally every day, you will wire out the toxicity in your brain. You see, it's not your amygdala that made you do it, or your hypothalamus that made you do it, or your malfunctioning prefrontal cortex that made you do it. Your brain can't make you do anything. Your brain simply responds. When you're very emotional, yes, your amygdala will fire up. We hear about the amygdala and emotions all the time, but your amygdala will fire up in response. Yes, the parts of your brain will fire up. Your brain's always responding. Your whole brain is always responding. Some parts fire up more than others, depending on what you're doing. But the point here is that you control that process. So when we talk about detoxing our mind and detoxing our brain, it's something that you do deliberately with your non-conscious, your non-conscious and your conscious mind, the non-physical, very, very, very powerful part of you. So where did I get these 5 steps from? In my years of brain research, looking at the mind-brain connection, and my extensive clinical work in private practice and in working in disadvantaged areas throughout the world and working with so many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, I have basically researched and worked out how a thought forms, the science of thought. So I've developed a theory called the geodesic information processing theory, which is fundamental to all the work that I do. If you want to know more about my theory, I have a webpage, drleaf.com. I have journal articles, but also in all my books, I have the image of my theory and explanations of my theory. Now, coming back to the 21-day detox, the 5 steps comes out of that theory. So I try to understand, to help my patients, how could they wire out a toxic thought, and how could they replace it with a healthy new replacement thought. And I developed 5 steps based on the complex neurophysiology of how the brain functions, and it's simplified it into these 5 steps. And when you do these 5 steps, you're basically changing how your brain is functioning. You're changing the circuitry of your brain. You're changing the wiring inside of your brain in the direction that you want it to go. So you are literally reconceptualizing and redesigning a toxic way of thinking into a healthy way of thinking. You're breaking down a toxic thought and building up a healthy replacement thought. You're not suppressing or ignoring or hiding or pretending it doesn't exist, because you can't do that. If you've built something into your brain, unless you wire it out with your mind, it stays. And if it's toxic, it's doing brain damage. And it creates those niggly feelings, and worry builds into anxiety, and anxiety can build into trauma. And when you're living in states of trauma, when you've got a lot of bitterness and anxiety and that kind of stuff inside of your brain, what that will do is lead to a lot of feelings of mental ill health. So mental ill health is not a disease at all. It is a very big thing. It is a real thing. And I have tremendous sympathy, and I acknowledge that depression, anxiety, these things exist, but they're not existing as diseases. And this is really good news. They are not diseases. They are umbrella terms for, like, depression is an umbrella term, anxiety is an umbrella term, schizophrenia. These are big words that incorporate a whole lot of information underneath them, and that information underneath them is a lot of descriptions of symptoms, and those symptoms are something that you've gone through in your life that you haven't dealt with. Maybe it was an abuse, maybe it was early childhood, something happening then, maybe it was something happening in your workplace, whatever. We all go through stuff, from the big to the small, and it all contributes. It's suffering, life is full with challenges, and that's we build into our brain. And if we don't deal with those, They are toxic issues and they will damage our brain and our body and increase our vulnerability to disease by 75 to 98%. So we've got to get rid of them. Or they will explode volcanic mode physically in our body, because we can get illnesses and diseases, etc. from that, and explode mentally. The big thing that we need to remember is that you cannot treat the mind, which is the non-physical, in the same way that you can treat the body. So by calling them a disease and giving medication doesn't solve the problem. What we have to do is we have to use our non-physical to fix the non-physical, and then to change the physical wiring inside of the brain. And that's what the 5 steps are doing. So you can use this for the big stuff, the traumas, those things that are blocking you succeeding in your life and achieving your goals. And you can use them for the small stuff, the smaller things, which are the day-to-day challenges and the day-to-day, maybe the bitterness and unforgiveness. And those aren't really small, they're big too. But I mean, like the abuses by the big things, and forgiveness and bitterness when we make wrong decisions, incorrect reactions. So the 5 steps. These 5 steps, once again, are based on the science of thought. I'm now going to give you a big picture of them, and we're going to talk a little bit more about them. And if you want to know more detail, there's a lot of detail in this book called Switch on Your Brain. My whole 21-day detox program is in here. We also have an app called Switch, and in that app, it walks you through day by day how to actually do the 21-day detox, which it does in written form here or in an app. But I'm going to tell you how to do it now. So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to focus on gather awareness of what is coming into your mind. Okay, the second, I'm going to give you a broad picture, and then I'm going to walk you through the process. Okay, so the first thing is to become aware of what you are taking into your mind. What is coming into your mind from the outside, from the signals outside, and what is coming up from inside your non-conscious mind into your conscious awareness. So as soon as you focus on things, as soon as you wake up, you are responding to things coming in, and that's causing information to move from our non-conscious mind. That information are the existing thoughts that you have been building right from literally when you were in the womb. Okay, so we've got lots of thoughts that keep changing. So we've got incoming, we've got upcoming. You need to gather awareness. Train yourself to be very self-regulatory, self-reflective, and aware of what is coming in. Don't let thoughts just roam chaotically through your brain. You want to control the thoughts that are moving through your mind and and subsequently through your brain. Okay, the second part is, once you're aware of these thoughts, is you need to then capture them. You need to literally grab them. You need to go into what we call superposition, which is the ability to focus on the incoming and the upcoming, and literally stop your mind, stand outside of yourself and observe your own thinking. That activates the front part of the brain and allows the front part of the brain to really fire up. And when that does, that means that your brain is responding to you self-regulating. The more you self-regulate, the more you self-reflect, the more you go into the state of superposition, where you are kind of in a limbo state, where you are focusing on the incoming and upcoming, the more your brain will respond effectively by firing up. It will also cause a very good movement of what we call gamma waves through your brain. So you'll be thinking more clearly. You'll have a great flow of neurotransmitters that will help you to have more focus, keep you calm. When you need to make good decisions, we need to be calm, etc. So a lot of fantastic things happen in your brain in response to this decision in your mind, this thinking, feeling, choosing decision to go into superposition and grab that incoming and upcoming thought. So then once you've done that, you start focusing on it and reflecting on it. And when we talk about focus and reflection, it means that. Focus on that thought. Eliminate the other stuff that's jumping around. Focus on that thought, the one that has the most pulling power. What's pulling at you? Okay? So when you've gathered awareness, there's a great chance that you would have gathered awareness of a ton of stuff. But there's something that all of us have got at the tip of our consciousness that is bugging us. There's a bunch of stuff. I know there's a bunch of stuff always in my life, okay, that you're always working on. But there's always something that is dominating. And that is the thought that you need to work on for the next 21 days. So when I talk about doing these 5 steps every day for 21 days, I'm talking about getting awareness and finding that one thing. And when you find that there's 10 things, prioritize and write that down and say, okay, that's what I'm going to focus on. And then you're going to focus directly onto that one thought, and you stick with that one thought for 21 days. So you gather awareness of that one thought, tell the others, I will deal with you later, and you get into that superposition, go into the second step, which is the focused reflection, the superposition, and you start asking, answering, and discussing. Asking, answering, discussing. What does this mean? What is the trigger? What is the core? You just do that step for literally 1.5 minutes. You do the gather step for about 1 minute, the second step for about 1.5 minutes. In that ask, answer, discuss of the focused reflection, that will then, after around about 1.5 minutes, you move over into writing. You write it down. Whatever has come into your head, whatever's come up, whatever's come in, and whatever you're thinking about in that superposition state, you're going to write it down. That's kind of the collapsing of the wave. When you write it down, you activate the basal ganglia, you activate the frontal lobe, you activate this cognitive fluency, and it kind of helps you work things out. So what's very funny normally is the first couple of days when we write things down, it just seems like a big jumbled mess. Because once again, I don't want you to write for hours. I just want you to write down for about 1 minute, maybe 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes at a push. And then you stop and you do the next step. And the next step is the revisit, the recheck, where you are going to look back at what you've written, where you're reflecting on, thinking about, editing. You know, like when you edit, you're checking for grammar, you're checking for meaning, you're checking for creativity, you're checking for what is this, you're looking for the patterns, you're looking for roots. So it's very informative. Then from there, you go to also around about 1 minute. Then from there, you go to the revisit or the active reach step, which is where the reteach, which is the active reach step. So now this is where you're going to work out something practical that you can do during the day that shouldn't take you more, honestly, than a couple of seconds, that you do at least 7 times in a day. And that's something related to what you've just written down. So whatever you've just written down, which is about the thought that you've been thinking, going through the 5 steps on, and it might be as simple as you identify that maybe you keep saying if only. You find that you keep saying, and you're losing the joy of moments because you keep saying if only. Or something, whatever it may be. And you can't, and it's kind of blocking you in your success. It's blocking you in moving forward because you're always kind of, if only I did this, and you waste time and energy. See, whatever you think about the most will grow. So we need to be very careful what we focus our energy on, because we create matter with what we're focusing our mind on. And what matter you make does really matter. Okay, so you look at what you've written down, you look at what you wrote down in that recheck edit process and see if you can work out some kind of a little thing. And let's say it is if only. And then during the course of the day today, you're going to be aware of how many times maybe you say the if only. So you could maybe, what I always do is use my phone and use my reminders and I put in there, check how many times I do if only today or something, whatever it is that I'm working on. I personally am always doing 21-day detoxes. This is a lifestyle. It's not that you do one 21-day detox and now you're all fixed. Forget it. That's crazy. Success comes when we recognize that we have to keep on cleaning up our minds, detoxing our minds. It's an ongoing process. Like you have to eat healthy all the time. You have to keep doing that exercise. You have to keep detoxing. Somehow it's so easy for us to get our heads around going to the gym every day or going on that run to train for a marathon every day. But somehow we just get so lazy with our minds. And a lot of it's related to the technological age that we live in, where we gather data like puzzle pieces and we don't build the puzzle, where we become so connected that we disconnect it, where we become confused in our mind about all this information and we forget to think deeply. Meanwhile, we are deeply intellectual beings. But research currently today shows people are not succeeding like they should, and people are landing up with all kinds of mental health problems, and there seems to be a rise in mental health. There's no rise in mental health issues. When every time we make a wrong decision, we are in a mental ill health state. We've been doing that since the beginning of time. What's rising is the management of our minds. And it's happening at a societal level. It's happening at a global level. We are not managing our minds. We are not detoxing our minds. We're not disciplining our minds. And that is causing this damage in the brain. And it's causing us to change the way that we are functioning as a society. And this is why we have things like this ADHD epidemic and ADD epidemic. And ADD and ADHD are not even scientific categories. They are responses to what's happening at a societal level. So we need to look at the technology. globally. We need to look globally at what's going on in our society. And we need to come back to what are we doing with our minds? Are we living in a state of bitterness and anger and anxiety? Are we working against our natural wired for love design? Because if we do that, we will create chaos in our minds. And that is reflected in what we say and what we do. Because whatever you say and whatever you do is first a thought that you have built inside your head. You are responsible for what you put inside your head. And whatever you think about the most will grow. So you need to think, okay, well, if people are constantly thinking about war and fighting and racism and toxic things as a society, we're going to see that happening in society. So whatever's happening around us in society is a result of what we are thinking about in our heads. Because let me tell you some basic science. You can't speak without first building the thought. The fact that I can say the words I'm saying means I first have a thought, a root from which they come. They're not random things that just pop out of your mouth. Whatever you say is coming from your brain as a source, and you put that in your brain with your mind. So when we look at what we say, we look at what we do, we look at what society is doing today and what's happening around us, shooting, racism, murders, deaths, suicides, war, crazy stuff, which has been around for years, but different times in history we have different patterns of problems occurring in different cycles and different increases in a response to the lifestyle. We have to stop and take stock of becoming human again. We have to realize it begins with us as humans, individuals, which reflects back into society. What are we thinking about? Because what we're thinking about is building the thoughts. The thoughts are producing the words, and the words are leading people to do things. If you're a very eloquent speaker and a powerful leader, and you have an idea and you present that strongly enough, you will get people following you and speaking your language and thinking about what you're saying. And this is what happens and build like a crescendo. And suddenly we have these massive movements. And that can be good too. Look at the Me Too movement just recently, where we're looking at that someone stood up. And that someone went into a lot of someones, and suddenly we had people saying, listen, enough, this far and no further. No longer will women be oppressed. We've got to stand up for our rights. We have to do that as a society with everything. So it starts with one person having a thought, getting that movement going, because you matter. We connected. We entangled in each other's lives. We can't not afford to detox our brain. We have to detox our brain. We have to detox our brain with our mind, which means we have to detox our mind and our brain. This stuff that I'm teaching is not a nice to know. This is a lifestyle. This is something that we should all do all the time. And that's why I said I'm always working on myself to make sure that my thinking is where it should be, so that I can speak the words that will help other people to function the way that they're supposed to do. Because every one of us contributes. Every one of us is different. The law of the brain is diversity. There's something you can do that no one else can do. And when we're operating in love, we operate in societies of love. So let's come back a little bit to memory and in terms of these cycles of 21 days. So I'm just going to recap, and then I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about habit formation and to show you how powerful this actually is. So you're going to do these 5 steps that I've explained, and you're going to do them for around about 7 to 16 minutes a day, which means that you only spend between 1 to 1.5 to 2 minutes max per each of the steps. Normally the reading one is the longer step. And that you do over every single day, deliberately and intentionally, over 21 days. Science shows us, and I've done a lot of this research on memory. Memory is a big part of the work that I've done, how thoughts form and how they stay in your head and how you learn and memory, etc. And what we see from the research is that it takes 21 days to build a memory. And it takes 21 days, therefore, to break down a memory. So to build a memory, to build a long-term memory, you build a memory immediately. But to make it a long-term memory, you need 21 days. Most of us have heard the myth that it takes 21 days to build a habit. It doesn't take 21 days to build a habit. It takes 21 days to build a long-term memory. Okay, now that long-term memory is going to be only as useful as what you do next. So if you just build the memory and don't do anything else, it goes into your non-conscious stores, but it doesn't have energy. If something doesn't have energy, it can't move from the very powerful quantum, infinite, non-conscious mind that is beyond space and time. It can't move out of that and into the conscious mind, which is much more limited in its speed and functionality. Very powerful, very, very powerful, but it's different to the non-conscious mind. So to get it from the non-conscious to the conscious, it has to get energy. How do you give a thought energy? By thinking about it, by working on it daily. and that there's a time frame. So what we see is that once you've built a long-term memory, if you then spend another 2 cycles of 21 days, honestly, just a few minutes every day, and I'm not talking about a lot of time, I'm honestly talking 7 seconds to 7 minutes a day, over the next 2 cycles of 21 days, so another 42 days, you're then going to hit a number of 63. You would have done 3 cycles of 21. The first one, to break down the toxic thought and build a healthy new one. Okay, so you reconceptualize it. You remember how you used to function, and now you're functioning in this new way. That's what reconceptualize means. So it's redesign. And then you're going to take that beautiful new thought and you're going to practice using it for another 2 cycles of 21 days, hence 63 days. It takes 63 days minimum to form a habit, not 21, 63 minimum. Okay, and sometimes if it's a big thing you're working on, you might need a couple of 63-day cycles. So you literally take one thought through 63 days. How do you do the second 2 cycles? I use my phone. I use the reminders on my phone. In the app, you'll have there's a little reminder that will help you to do this. And essentially, you just put that in, and every day it pops up on the screen, and I'm reminded that I need to work on that. So it's actually quite a simple process, but it requires discipline. It requires a process of about 3 weeks to master the cycle, but it is revolutionizing in terms of how it will change how you function and how you function in the world, because what you do really does matter. You see, we can't control the events and circumstances of our life, but we can control our reactions. Thank you for joining me on this seminar. I'm Dr. Caroline Leaf.